much of its longevity over time, making it a strong candidate for reuse, in most cases. An AM2 Plus cooler such as this one will fit a wide range of other AMD sockets, as AMD has managed to retain the design of their mounting bracket system over the years. Pre-built systems using Intel chips with Intel CPU coolers, on the other hand, are a different story, as the company typically changes out their mounting design with the release of newer sockets. If your AMD or Intel CPU cooler does happen to be compatible with your new computer's hardware, you'll also want to make sure that it has enough cooling capacity to sufficiently cool your new CPU. There's a fair chance that your new processor will use more power and produce more heat than your old one, so be sure that the TDP rating of your CPU cooler is higher than the operating TDP of your new CPU. Now, as for you enthusiasts out there who plan on overclocking your CPUs, this probably goes without saying, but chances are the cooler in that old rig just isn't going to cut it, so plan on picking up a new one that doesn't blow. Metaphorical sense, of course. I mean, literally speaking, they should all blow. Now that we're on the unforeseen topic of blowing, now would be a good time to discuss case fans. With a proper dusting, the fans in your old case can run good as new, as long as your new chassis supports the appropriate fan size. It should be noted, however, that higher-end cases these days are less likely to support fans smaller than 120mm. At the front of the case, our Pavilion packs a single 500GB Samsung hard drive at 7200 RPM. System builders will be happy to hear that the hard drive is probably the most reusable component for a new PC. The technology in hard drives hasn't changed much over the years, though we're seeing drives with bigger capacities now more than ever before. Still, you can get a lot of mileage out of 500 gigs, even by today's standards, and users with more demanding storage needs can still use this as a secondary drive in their system or repurpose it into an external drive. Like hard drives, optical drives haven't evolved much in recent years either, and some would argue that the outdated technology has already gone the way of the dinosaur. Be that as it may, some folks still like having the option built in when they need it. And lucky for them, this is one of the easiest parts to welcome into a new PC. And lastly, we have this 300-watt power supply from BezTech that sits silently perched above the unsuspecting components, waiting for the day when it swiftly vanquishes them with an explosive pit of fire like some bloodthirsty pyro. But yes, my confrontation with pre-built power supplies is often met with suspicion and distrust, in case you missed it. While I have to hand it to this unit for not racking up a list of burn victims in its 6 years of service, most pre-built desktops are known to ship with cheapy power supplies that meet the bare minimum requirements for their product warranties. Apart from the issue of reliability and safety, it's also unlikely that your old power supply will have all the appropriate connectors and the necessary wattage to drive your new system. In the end, when it's time to ditch your old computer, it's probably best that the sketchy power supply inside be buried with it. And I think that pretty much wraps it up, ladies and gentlemen, so hopefully you enjoyed this little tour of my dad's old rig, and hopefully those of you coming from a pre-built PC and looking to build your next one are now better equipped to take on the challenge. Before you go, don't forget to toss me a like on this video if you enjoyed it, and check the description below where you can buy an awesome sauce shirt, not like this one, new design coming soon by the way, and bookmark my Amazon affiliate link and use it when you buy stuff. It helps me a lot. As always, I'm Cal with Awesome Sauce Network. Thank you guys for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And I'll see y'all in the next video.
What is going on, everyone? Jay's 2 cents here, and when I did the video about my 6700K build last week, a lot of folks pointed out the fact that there's a front-mounted radiator on there.
And you can't do that because it's going to heat up everything in your system, and it's terrible, and the world is going to end as far as we know it, and it's just bad for all of your parts.
And I got to thinking, I've been putting front-mounted radiators on computers for years and years, and not once has any of those terrible doomsday type of predictions ever happened. So I thought maybe today we would just kind of go ahead and do, for the sake of science, a video here about comparing temperatures with the radiator mounted to the front and seeing if allowing warmer air to enter the front of the computer really makes a huge overall difference. The Master Case 5 and Master Case 5 Pro from Cooler Master combines modularity with creativity, giving you the freedom to build it your way. Make it yours by clicking the link down in the description. Okay, so hardware-wise, it is an Intel 6700K. It is overclocked. We'll probably be doing somewhere around 4.7 for this test at something like 1.3 volts, somewhere around there. We want to pump some heat. We want to really kind of go for some numbers here in this test. If we just run stock speeds, then I don't think anything would really be affected, which is actually a good thing, but we want to see in kind of a worst case scenario whether or not the claims of front-mounted radiators are going to cause problems temperature-wise for your parts. So it's a 6700K overclocked Corsair H100i. We do have in here also a reference Titan X, of course they're all reference, but it is a blower style cooler. So it's going to be getting all of its air from inside the case. The case cooling is not going to have any effect on the temperatures of the GPU, which is why I'm using a blower style cooler. All of its air it's getting is going to be atmospheric air inside the case, which means if the front mounted radiator really is warming up the case, then we can go ahead and see that by using a blower style cooler, because that's the only place it's getting air. If we used an atmospheric cooler where it's circulating the air into the case and then the case has to exhaust it, then the case itself is going to play more of a factor here than where things are placed. So that's why we're going with the blower cooler on the Titan X. We're going with the Titan X because it is the biggest, most powerful, hottest GPU core right now that NVIDIA has on a single GPU. Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's a Titan Z that has 2 GPUs, but that again is a half exhaust, half recirculating cooler, which would not have worked very well for this test. Okay, so just to do some baseline numbers here, I have a laser temperature get probe as well as an air temperature meter. So right now the ambient temperature here in the room, let's go ahead and restart this, is sitting at 24 Celsius or 75.2 Fahrenheit is what the air temperature is in this room. So now before we start the test, I'm going to go ahead and set this on top of the exhaust fan here. I'm going to let it measure the temperature of the air exiting the system here for, I don't know, about 60 seconds or so. And then that's our baseline. That's where we are right now before running any tests and running any sort of heat through the system and letting things kind of balance out. And then we'll run it through load, get our numbers, make sure the ambient temperature in the room is the same. I've got the air running to keep it pretty consistent. Then we'll do it again and compare, and then we'll do the same thing with the GPU. Okay, so the air coming out of the computer is measuring 77.0 Fahrenheit, and in C, for those of you using Celsius, that is 24.9. At least that's what it's showing there. 76.8, because it comes down pretty quickly here. So that's what we've got here as a baseline. So let's go ahead and start our Ada 64. Let this thing heat up the system, and let's see how hot it gets to.
Transition.
I've had the test going now for over 10 minutes. I stopped it for a second there and forgot to hit record on the camera. Anyway, ambient temperature in the room is still 75.2, and I have had the thermometer up here measuring the temperature exiting the case with this thing going at 100%. And as you can see, we actually did get a little bit of throttling here on the CPU due to temperature. We actually hit 100C on the first core several times. So that's just to show you here that we are pushing this thing for as much heat as we possibly can. I don't recommend actually doing that and forcing your CPU to go all the way to throttling temps, but I wanted to exacerbate.
That's exacerbate, not the other word.
I wanted to kind of exacerbate the situation as best I can to get these tests, as concrete as possible. So anyway, we're going to remove this now. And the air leaving the case is at 78.6 degrees Fahrenheit, or 26C. So as you can see, it's I mean, we could pretty much already call this conclusive if we wanted to, where the air that is exiting the case is hardly heated up by the air entering the case, at least with the H100i. If I go ahead and set this thing on the front, so that it's measuring the air that's coming down. It does, if you guys are curious about whether or not the S340 can actually pull air in very well or if it's too obstructed, you can see this little blade right here will actually move due to the airflow and tell you how much air is actually going in there. And I believe you guys will actually be able to see this. Let's double check here. So if I set this thing on the front of the case right here, check this out. See that? It is pulling air in just fine. So we'll let that measure the intake temperature right now. Intake temperature going into the front of the case. Let that go for just a second here, because it takes time to actually measure and balance it out. All right, 77.9 degrees Fahrenheit is what's entering the case, and what is exiting the case, 78.6. So do you see how the front intake radiator, at least on a setup like this, is not really doing a whole lot in terms of heating up the system. There's that test. Let's go ahead and do this now. Let's go ahead and take, in fact, I'm going to skip taking the side panel off for the CPU test. There's really no point. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and stop this now. I don't want to doing too much more throttling on my CPU. See, the temperatures came down really quickly, back down to the 30s on the core. Let's let things cool off, and then we're going to go ahead and run a GPU test on this, and then we'll see if the GPU temperatures rise at all if we do it right after running a stressful CPU test. I really don't think that's going to be the case just based on the numbers that we've already seen. Now, I'm not using an opinion here. I'm using a thermometer to do the test. So I don't see how, you know, this could be an opinion thing. This is just flat out, what does the thermometer say? Anyway, let's go from there. Okay, so what I've done right now is I've loaded up GPU tests for Valley Benchmark, and we have overclocked the GPU 100 megahertz, left